Life unfolds in patterns, subtle, often unseen connections that link seemingly unrelated moments, actions, and outcomes. A single decision ripples outward, shaping not just individual lives but the collective experiences of those around us. These threads of influence aren't random. They reveal an underlying order, a web of relationships that binds everything together. This principle of mutual influence extends far beyond individuals and nature. It governs how organisms grow, how societies evolve, and even how ideas spread. It suggests that existence is less a collection of isolated events and more a vast, intricate web where every action resonates outward, shaping and being shaped by the whole. The evidence for these patterns appears across multiple domains of human experience. In linguistics, children around the world acquire language with remarkable uniformity, despite enormous variations in their learning environments. They don't just learn to speak. They reinvent grammar with such consistency that linguists like Noam Chomsky have argued for innate language structures. Mathematical insights follow similar patterns. When ancient cultures independently developed concepts like zero, infinity, or geometric principles, they weren't just making isolated discoveries. They were accessing universal patterns that exist independently of any particular mathematical system. Modern research has identified the missing heritability problem in genetics, where extensive family studies and twin studies indicated much higher heritability, often 80% or more, than could be explained by known genetic mechanisms, suggesting that some form of non-genetic inheritance might be operating. Rupert Sheldrake describes this as the idea of mysterious telepathy-type interconnections between organisms and of collective memories within species through what he terms morphic resonance. But before we dive into the theoretical frameworks, let's ground ourselves in the phenomena that demand explanation. The British biochemist turned biologist has spent decades documenting cases that stretch our understanding of how information travels through biological systems. He attempted to prove his theory through various experiments. Take the famous example of the British blue tits, for instance. Small birds that, in the 1920s, began removing the foil caps from milk bottles to access the cream. This behavior spread across Britain far too rapidly to be explained by simple learning from nearby birds. Even more intriguingly, when milk deliveries stopped during World War II and resumed years later, birds that had never seen this behavior before immediately began exhibiting it. The behavior had somehow persisted in the absence of any living practitioners. Morphic fields, according to Sheldrake's hypothesis, help to explain embryology, biological development, habits, memories, instincts, telepathy, and the sense of direction. This isn't about supernatural phenomena. It's about recognizing that the mechanisms we currently understand may be incomplete. When a chemist synthesizes a new compound for the first time, it often proves difficult to crystallize. But once it's been done somewhere in the world, the same compound begins crystallizing more readily in laboratories everywhere, even where researchers have no knowledge of the original success. The implications extend far beyond individual organisms. Consider how technologies develop. The invention of calculus by both Newton and Leibniz independently, the simultaneous development of evolutionary theory by Darwin and Wallace, the multiple independent discoveries of oxygen. These aren't coincidences, but patterns that suggest ideas themselves might follow principles of field resonance. When the morphic field for a particular innovation reaches a certain threshold, it becomes accessible to minds attuned to that frequency of understanding. This resonance operates across scales that span from molecular interactions to global cultural shifts. In the 1960s, researchers noticed that laboratory rats around the world were getting better at running specific mazes, even though no individual rat had completed these mazes before. The improvement couldn't be attributed to genetic changes or environmental factors. It appeared as though each rat was somehow building upon the collective learning of all the rats that had come before it. But morphic resonance doesn't operate in isolation. It exists within a larger context of what the French paleontologist Pierre Teilhard de Chardin called the Noosphere, literally the sphere of mind. Teilhard envisioned the Omega Point as a theorized future event in which the entirety of the universe spirals toward a final point of unification, representing the culmination of evolutionary development, not just of matter and life, but of consciousness itself. To understand this, we need to step back and consider evolution not as a purely random process, but as something with direction, what Teilhard called complexification. First came the geosphere, the realm of matter organizing itself into increasingly complex structures. Then the biosphere emerged, with life adding new layers of organization and information processing. Now we're witnessing the emergence of the Noosphere, where human consciousness creates new forms of complexity through technology, culture, and shared knowledge. Teilhard theorized that human intelligence, or Noosphere, was the highest point of human evolution, and therefore humanity was going to reach the Omega Point, which is the independence and immortality of the human intellect. But this isn't about individual transcendence, it's about collective evolution. Every time someone shares an insight, creates art that resonates across cultures, or develops technology that connects minds across distances, they're contributing to the growth of this planetary thinking layer. The internet provides a tangible glimpse of what Teilhard envisioned. When you search for information online, you're not just accessing data. You're tapping into the collective knowledge and experience of millions of minds. But the Noosphere encompasses more than digital networks. It includes every conversation, every book, every moment of shared understanding that builds the cumulative wisdom of our species. Teilhard explained that this Noosphere can be moved toward or constructed to be the Omega Point, or the final evolutionary stage, with the help of science, through what he called planetization, the process by which human consciousness becomes increasingly unified and coherent. We can observe this happening in real time through global responses to challenges like climate change, pandemics, or technological disruption, where solutions emerge through unprecedented levels of international cooperation and information sharing. What makes this particularly fascinating is how morphic resonance and the Noosphere complement each other. Morphic fields operate through what Sheldrake calls formative causation. Patterns become more probable the more often they occur. The Noosphere operates through what we might call integrative causation. Individual insights contribute to collective understanding that then influences future individual insights. As Sheldrake explains, morphic resonance is primarily to do with an influence from the past, whereas telepathy occurs in the present and depends on the bonds between members of the group. This suggests that consciousness itself might be more distributed than we typically assume. When scientists working independently arrive at similar breakthrough insights, when social movements emerge simultaneously across different continents, when artistic innovations appear in multiple cultures without direct contact, these phenomena point towards something that operates beyond individual minds while still working through them. But we need to be careful not to romanticize these processes. This means the same mechanisms can also amplify fear, misinformation, and destructive behaviors. Sheldrake's hypothesis suggests that the more often a self-organizing process takes place, the easier it will be for it to take place in the future, which means negative patterns can become just as entrenched as positive ones. This brings us to a crucial recognition. If these fields of influence are real, then we bear responsibility for the patterns we strengthen through our choices, thoughts, and actions. Every time we choose compassion over indifference, curiosity over judgment, or cooperation over competition, we're not just affecting our immediate environment, we're contributing to the morphic fields that make these choices easier for others. And its practical implications ripple through every aspect of human endeavor. In education, this suggests that learning happens not just through information transfer, but through resonance with established fields of knowledge. Master craftspeople often speak of this intuitively, describing how certain skills can only be transmitted through direct practice and presence, as if the knowledge exists in the doing rather than in abstract concepts. This brings us to a profound recognition. The boundaries we typically draw between individual and collective, between mind and matter, between past and present, may be far more permeable than our current worldview suggests. Indigenous wisdom traditions have long recognized this interconnectedness, describing reality as a web of relationships where every action ripples through the whole. Modern physics, particularly quantum mechanics, has revealed similar non-local connections that challenge our assumptions about the fundamental nature of reality. Still, what emerges from this exploration is not a new belief system, but a recognition that the phenomena demanding explanation are far richer and more interconnected than our current paradigms suggest. Whether we call it morphic resonance, noospheric evolution, quantum consciousness, or something else entirely, we're pointing toward the same underlying reality. The universe appears to be far more integrated and purposeful than random chance and mechanical causation alone can explain. The question isn't whether these patterns exist. They're clearly observable across every domain of human experience. The question is how we integrate this recognition into our understanding of how reality operates and how we choose to participate in its ongoing evolution. If morphic fields preserve and transmit patterns of organization, and if the noosphere represents the collective evolution of consciousness, then our individual choices and contributions matter in ways that extend far beyond their immediate effects. This recognition carries both tremendous opportunity and significant responsibility. Every time we engage in practices that develop our capacities for awareness, compassion, and wisdom, we're not just improving our own lives. We're strengthening the morphic fields that make these qualities more accessible to others. Every time we create something beautiful, solve a meaningful problem, or contribute to collective understanding, we're participating in the noospheric evolution that shapes the trajectory of consciousness itself. The beauty of this perspective lies not in its certainty, but in its invitation to participate more consciously in the patterns that are already shaping our world. We don't need to fully understand the mechanisms of morphic resonance or noospheric evolution to recognize that our lives are embedded in webs of connection that extend far beyond what we can see or measure directly. What we can do is pay attention to the subtle ways these connections manifest in our daily experience. When we feel drawn to pursue certain paths of learning or service, when we find ourselves part of movements that seem to emerge spontaneously, when we discover that our individual insights contribute to collective breakthroughs, these may be moments when we're most consciously participating in the larger patterns that are always operating through us. In this case, the invitation is for us to recognize ourselves, not as isolated individuals struggling to survive in an indifferent universe, but as integral participants in an ongoing evolutionary process that encompasses not just biological development, but the development of consciousness itself. In this recognition lies both humility, acknowledging how much remains beyond our understanding, and empowerment by recognizing how much our conscious participation matters to the larger whole, of which we're always already a part.